So thank you everybody for being here, our wonderful panelists, our awesome prospective students, and for some of you current students. And we will get started with introduction. So I'm Shelby. I am the Senior Admissions Counselor for the Master's in Counseling program. And I'm really excited to be here this morning with all of you awesome folks. And I will pass it over to our panelists to introduce yourselves as well, please.
Well, I'll go first. My name is Deshaun Johnson. I am a soon to be past student, just graduated this semester. So it's good to see you all. Hope you guys have a lot of great questions.
I can go next. I just saw I'm not on mute. So, hi, I'm Dr. Kristen Watson, and I'm one of the Practicum coordinators and also a core faculty member in the counseling department. And I oversee the Practicum coordination for students who are in our residential hybrid program. And that's me.
And I'm Dr. Jenny Ju, and I am Dr. Kristen Watson's counterpart on the distance learning. And distance learning means that you're either in California, but you're taking classes online, or you are in a different state, or you're in a different country. We do have international students doing practicum as well. So I'm the person you can contact with, and we'll try to guide you through. Good to have everyone here today.
Hi everybody, I'm Drika. I am going to be graduating at the end of summer. I am a MA counseling online hybrid student.
Can you add where you're from, Drika? Just because
Sure.
people from all over here.
Yeah, I'm on the East Coast. I'm down in Georgia.
Hi everyone, my name is Hallie Yoon and I am in San Francisco. I am in the hybrid program, the counseling program. I'll be graduating this coming fall.
Hi everyone, my name is Jesse. I'm a residential student here in the Bay. I live in Fremont, and I will be starting practicum this fall at the City of Fremont Youth and Family Services. And yeah, I will be graduating next spring. And I'm an admissions assistant for Shelby, so I work with Shelby in the admissions office.
Hi, I'm Cynthia. I'm in the Bay Area, specifically in Redwood City. I'm in the Los Altos campus, and I will also plan to graduate in the fall.
Hi everybody, I'm Jocelyn Schneider, and I live in Brentwood in Northern California. So I'm about an hour and 10 minutes from campus when COVID is happening, and about 2.5 to 3 hours from campus when COVID's not happening. I am a second year, and I'll be starting practicum in the fall, and we'll hopefully graduate in May of 2021, sounds like, with Jesse.
Awesome. Thank you everybody for introducing yourselves. So one of the questions that we get really frequently is, do I get any help with finding a site for practicum and internship? So Dr. Zhu and Dr. Watson, if you don't mind, could you share a little bit more about how much support students have with finding their sites?
So I can start, and Dr. Watson, please feel free to fill in. So that's the student's first responsibility, is the student's responsibility to find the site. However, we provide support along the way. So if you're in California, we already have established a lot of partnership with local organizations for practicum placement. You know, we're starting to have some sites in other states as well, and in some international countries as well. You know, so you can go to, we do have a database of sites that we already have agreements with, and you can look through them and see if there's anything that is in your area that you're interested in, and you can contact them. And if you're in a state or in an area where we don't have any, partnership with any of the agencies, then you get to be a trailblazer. You get to go and find your own site. However, I can provide, Dr. Wathen or I can provide some guidance as to how to go about doing that. What do I miss, Dr. Wathen?
Oh, you didn't miss anything, Dr. Ju. I'm just going to add, for those of you who live in the Bay Area, whether you are in our residential hybrid program or whether you're an online student in the Bay Area, we do have a practicum fair every December, where sites from all over the Bay Area come and are recruiting students for their internship experience. And probably some of your the students here today will talk a little bit about that. It will look a little different this year. We're still investigating what we're going to do, whether it will be, in person or whether it will be an online type of fair. We're not sure yet, but we have been doing that for many years, and we have great partnerships with area sites. So I think I'm looking at the students that are here today. There's a couple of them that have sites that we haven't worked with before, but there's several students who have sites that are part of partnerships that we've had for years. I think one of the exciting things is that we don't limit you. If you're interested in a certain population, there's not a site that has that, whomever you'd like to work with, then we are willing to work with that site. They do have to meet certain parameters, just as the site would want to make sure we met certain parameters. But we want you to get the experience that you want. And so we're willing to work, and Dr. Ju and I do a lot of interacting with new site directors every year. So if you find a site that's someplace you'd really like to work, we're open to that as long as they fall within the requirements that are going to help you get your degree.
Can I add one thing is that, each year, Dr. Wathen and we have practicum orientation meetings. So, if you're starting the process, you attend those meetings, then you will become familiar with standards and requirements, and also questions that you want to ask clinical sites as well.
I will share just a little anecdote that happened recently that might give you a perspective from another person, even though that's me sharing. There's a little bias there, but Dr. Ju and I worked really hard with the COVID scenario and our practicum students. And we sent out a flyer, just encouraging any sites that have some extra spots this summer to let us know. One of our site supervisors accidentally wrote back to me instead of forwarding to her, what is that? I don't know, person higher up. I can't think of words today. Boss. Thank you, site director. And it said, do we have any of these opportunities? PAU really takes care of their students. And so that felt really nice for us to hear. And while, nothing's perfect, we really work hard to do our best. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I figure we're both going to say the same thing. You sign a site contract with a site, and so the site contract is something that we want you to, abide by. At the same time, sometimes there are situations that arrive where maybe it's not a good fit, or your, life circumstances change, or your supervision is not, what we would want. And then we definitely work with you to be able to switch sites. Dr. G may have a different perspective working with students all over the country, because it's pretty normal outside of the Bay Area for students to maybe have more than one site. However, in the Bay Area, many sites are more used to people staying for a year and having contracts that last a year. So I try to support the sites and the student. We encourage you to stay with the site if you've signed a contract, and we will navigate and negotiate and work with you if there are things that come up that make that a challenge. So I've had 2 students in my practicum classes that have changed sites this year. not necessarily in my practicum class, one in my practicum class, and then one in my, and then a few in my like coordinator role. So it is possible in the Bay Area, but we would encourage. And then let Dr. Ju, if you want to share your perspective as a.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wathan. I think, you know, there's a practical, there's a practical reason for that as well. When you start practicum, the first quarter, you're not seeing a lot of clients. The site and the supervisor invest a lot of time, resources in training you and helping you to become familiar with all the ins and outs of the operation and building your skills. And therefore, they invested that whole quarter, the first quarter. And then if you leave after the first quarter, they're very disappointed. But the benefit to you is in terms of accruing hours. You know, if you're going to be there for just one quarter, your site is not going to give you clients mid-quarter, because then you're only going to be seeing clients, you know, 3-4 times, and then they would have to transfer to a new clinician, which also means that you'll get fewer hours, right? Because then you stop getting new clients mid-quarter. And then when you start a new site, then you're not going to get clients right away. So you need to consider that it's going to result in some loss of clinical hours if you do switch sites. But we can do that. You know, there's sometimes, as Dr. Wathan says, that you know, life circumstances or for whatever reason, it's not a good fit and you need to switch.
Thank you very much. So to our student panelists, can you tell us how you got the sites that you got, where you are, and how you selected your site?
I can share. For me, I attended the Practicum Fair, which I would highly recommend. It's really, really helpful. Before even knowing much about the Practicum Fair, I also felt very, you know, anxious and, you know, just all of those like those thoughts like, how am I going to find a site? Can I find a site that will, you know, best fit for me? And so attending the Practicum site, it's awesome. You get to meet, you know, the people that are, you know, presenting those sites. They'll explain about their purpose, what they serve. They'll talk about populations. The site that I am currently at is CHAC, which they are located in Mountain View. I did know about them before attending the Practicum Fair, and in case you guys are wondering, CHAC does serve various populations, but they do contract. We are contracted to be working at a school, so an elementary school, middle school, or high school, but then you can also work with clients like in their agency, so adults or couples, families. So they work with all populations. So yeah, I've been with CHAC since August. My contract did end this month, but I will be continuing with them for the rest of the summer.
I could kind of touch on that a little bit also. So my practicum experience has been exceptional. I think the teachers and the professors do a really good job of preparing us before we hit practicum. There's a lot of emails that goes out. Our teachers and professors are very personable, so they make that experience that much more. I too went to the Practicum Fair, and it was a smooth transition. I ended up getting a placement at the city of Fremont. I speak highly of them, highly recommend it, and I actually ended up getting a position there as a substance abuse counselor. So my practicum experience has went really, really well. I think our staff members, our teachers, professors do a really good job of preparing us for that.
So I can speak about the online experience because I feel like it's a little bit different from the residential experience. For me, I knew I wanted to work with kids, teenagers in particular. So I didn't have a chance to go to the fair because it's in California for those residents. But honestly, I did a Google search. I tried to find a couple of places where I could find the population that I wanted to work with. And then I made sure I started ahead of time because there are some sites that do not prefer online degrees. So I also had to consider that as well in my choices. So I had to apply to more sites than, you know, maybe some other people did. But the faculty was really great in like sending emails, answering any questions that, you know, site supervisors had. But a quick Google search and then going through my community and finding different places and going to talk to people was very beneficial, and it was a great experience.
I can also speak to the online experience, even though I'm only an hour and 10 minutes away. I'm online entirely. And again, like Drika said, the professors and the administration was just really supportive. I was already volunteering. I wasn't employed, but I was already volunteering at the county clinic for children and adolescents. And I asked them if I could be an intern or, you know, do my practicum with them. And Dr. Ju was instrumental in communicating with the person in charge. And we worked it out, and I'm ready to go. It was really seamless. And thanks to Dr. Ju and Sarah Kimball, who's in administration, who is amazing and is our Tavera person, our online person who helps us with all the paperwork stuff, all the mysteries. Anyway, it was great. So it wasn't hard at all. And let me just say also that it was a site that had never hosted a PAU student before. So it was one of those trailblazing situations like Dr. Ju talked about.
I can go. I think my suggestion for the future students is that to really put in work of like researching the site. I ended up with a really good site, but I wasn't able to get all of my hours. But thankfully I found another site for my summer quarter, and hopefully I'll be done with my hours. But I feel like there are sites that offer stipends, and so you should look into that. And also just researching how their supervision goes, interviewing former interns would be a good, you know, start. Like if you're at a practicum fair, you can easily ask them, can I reach out to the former interns and ask them their opinion? That's something I didn't do, I should have done, but you can totally do that. And also just really writing down pros and cons. Like if you're working with a school-based program, if you're working with high schoolers, and the chances are they're not gonna be as consistent with showing up to therapy. So just taking into consideration all of that. And yes, like the first part of the practicum, you're not getting as many students, and that's understandable, and that's a good way to start. But when you transition into internship, make sure you communicate with your supervisor that I need these hours until spring quarter. So, and really plan how you're gonna get those hours and how many new clients you're gonna get. So that's something I didn't do. So I'm just talking about from my own experience. So just make sure you communicate well how you're gonna reach your hours. And yeah.
And that leads into the next question too. How many hours are you all spending at your sites each week, would you say?
Well, my experience is a little different because I got hired on to my site for SUD, and also I internship for mental health. So before I got the position, I guess I was spending 5 hours 3 times a week there. So the city of Fremont did a really good job of starting us off slow and gradually building our caseload, which I really, really appreciated. But once I took on the extra job, right, my hours increased because I had to meet, because I have a daughter, I have a wife and things like that. So I had to meet that 40-hour mark. So I was doing much more time than probably you guys will be doing in your practicum sites. So I would say 3 times a week, 5 hours a day, probably.
So for me, the first semester, I was also there about 3 times a week for about 5 or 6 hours a day. But once I moved over to internship for the second semester, my hours essentially doubled. So I was about 30 to 32 hours per week. So it might look a little different depending on your situation.
At my site, in the contract that we signed before officially beginning practicum, we were expected to dedicate 25 hours a week. So that included, you know, face-to-face hours with clients, paperwork, supervision, trainings. For me specifically, I started those 25 hours immediately. My situation was different. I was working with children and families of high need. And so I was given a lot of cases, which was really understandable, but there were other, there were other interns that started off slowly as well. So it just depends on the population that you serve. But my site at CHAC specifically, I did dedicate about 25 hours a week.
Cynthia, can you spell the name of your agency? There was a question in there that somebody asked for you to spell it.
Yeah, so it's CHAC, which stands for Community Health Awareness Council.
Does anybody else want to share the hours that they're spending at their site before we move into the next question, which is kind of related?
Well, I will share what the contract that I just signed with the city of Fremont of what was expected, and it was 3 days per week, average, you know, 20 hours or 20 to 25 hours, and expected 10 to 12 client caseload. Of course, you know, you won't get all those clients at once, like, but that would eventually, when you go into your internship in your second quarter, you'd get, you know, that's kind of what was expected, at least in the contract that I had signed with them. So that's kind of the idea. I'm not sure if that will be what it will in fall, but that's kind of what it's expected now.
Thank you, Jesse. So a lot of the time I get questions about practicum from prospective students around working while also being in school. So I would like if Dr. Zhu and Dr. Wathen could share a little bit about whether or not students can work while they're doing their practicum and internships. And then if any of our student panelists do work a separate job in addition to doing their practicum and internship, I'd also like to hear what your experience has been if you've had that experience. So Dr. Zhu, Dr. Wathen, do you mind kicking us off here?
So practicum time is very stressful. And you know, by the time you get to your second and third quarter of practicum, you need to be devoting 2 to 3 days at your practicum site. So it is good to have conversation with your employer if you're currently employed full-time, that, you know, oh, next year I'm going to be doing practicum. I'm going to need 2 to 3 days at a minimum 2 days to be away from work. How are we going to make this happen? Is there some flexibility in my current place of employment? So if you're going to, because you're also going to be taking classes the same time that you're going to be doing practicum as well. And if you have a full-time job, that is, you know, that is a lot of stressors at the same time. However, we do understand that you do need to pay bills and pay tuition as well. And so people do do work during that time. But yeah, it all depends on how flexible your employer is and the number of hours you're working. Yeah, and there are also some students who are able to use their place of employment to do internship. It doesn't mean that what you're currently doing is going to count for internship. That never happens. And the reason is because if you're currently doing the work that can qualify for internship, it means one of two things, right? It means that either you're doing it illegally because, you know, if you're doing work that is suitable or is allowed only for master's level clinicians, or that you're going to be doing work that's a bachelor level work, but you want to count it as a master's level internship. So generally that does not happen, that you can count what you're currently doing as internship. However, we have had students, and this year there have been a number of students who they're working at an organization. They're already employed there. However, there's another department that will allow them to do psychotherapy. And so it's going to be, so they will be supervised under a different superior, and they will be, how do I say, they will be evaluated differently for the internship versus their current employment. Therefore, there's no dual relationship issue. You're not going to be running into the same clients for your employment as well as for your internship. And they can also keep, you know, the compensation separate in that way. Does that help, or did I confuse you guys more?
I think just you work with if you are interested in adding a job that where you current, like Deshaun's, we did a lot of emailing back and forth with Deshaun and his supervisor to make sure that what he was doing beforehand in his job it was different than what he's doing now. Because, you know, if you can do a job that's with a bachelor's degree, then that's not meeting the requirements, like Dr. Ju said, of what you're doing in your master's program training program. So they gave him additional responsibilities and differed what he was doing in his job. We don't have a lot of students that take that on because, like Deshaun mentioned, it's a lot. However, again, like Dr. Ju said, we, you know, understand that you also have bills, and that's just, you know, part of life. And so we have some students that do that, but we don't recommend it unless you just need to and have to, which is totally fine. And we have to make sure you meet the requirements and the site meets the requirements. Is that all, Dr. G, you think, or should we add anything else? It's tough. It's just the practicum part is a hard part. There are some sites with stipends, but not very many.
Yeah, and I don't want you to, yeah, I think there's a question about that too. It is very rare, so I don't want you to go in thinking that, oh, I'll be, you know, doing my internship, I can earn some money as well. That's very rare. And even, but what is becoming more common is that you end up having to pay for supervision, because especially in Southern California, I think some of you are asking about Southern California. I have 3 students this year in Southern California who have to pay for supervision because their sites cannot, because the supervisors are generally super busy people. And, you know, if they have, sometimes they cannot oversee all of the supervisees. And so when we ask for placement of new interns, sometimes the site will say, we're at capacity, our supervisors cannot oversee any more interns, but you're welcome to come, however, if you can find outside supervisor. And so I do have 3 students currently in Southern California who have to pay for their own supervision.
And for our student panelists, if any of you all work, or Jesse, I know you're about to start practicum, so you can jump in on this too if you'd like, but what was your plan if you were working and doing practicum, or plan to work while doing your practicum?
I'll talk a little bit about this, but I'm different because I've worked in the restaurant industry my whole college career. So I've been working in restaurants for about 10 years. So I've always had the flexibility of moving my schedule around and working in evenings and on the weekends until COVID-19 happened, and you know, all that. I'm not working in that field anymore. So that's how I'm able to manage the schedule more. I can't really speak to somebody who works a normal 9 to 5. So I'm a little bit special in that way, I guess.
So I also worked the entire time doing practicum and internship as well. And my job was a little more flexible. I used to work as an educator, and then I moved to just a nanny position because it was more flexible. So the hours are grueling. So I would go in to work in the morning, take care of the kids, and then I would do my internship hours during the day while they're at school, and then go pick them up until late night and, you know, send them off to bed. So it's definitely doable. You do need something that's more flexible. And there will be days where you're just literally exhausted because you've been going all day long, 12 hours, 15 hours, however long it is. But if you have to pay your bills like I did and you don't have help, then you kind of have to, you know, do what you have to do. But I would just say stay organized, communicate with your boss and your site supervisor as well, and just try to find the best way to schedule time. If you can find internships that you can do it in the afternoon and you work during the day, then find that. Whatever best suits your situation.
Yeah, and I'll just add, like, I agree with everything that was said. During this time, I think it's important, like, if you absolutely have to, like I did, a way that I kind of got through was I linked on my natural supports. So family members, friends, organization was a must for me. But it was definitely challenging. I would recommend, if you have the resources and bandwidth to, you know, kind of prioritize this, because this would be a year out, maybe like start prioritizing now, maybe start getting things together now so you can 100% focus on that second half of practicum, because it is going to be really challenging, especially when your caseload increases. So yeah, I just had a really unique situation in which this is something that I had to do. But if I could go back and do it my way, I would definitely prioritize that time to really focus on the richness of meeting with your clients through that second half of practicum.
Thank you. Thank you all for answering those questions. And we've got quite a few coming into the Q&A box, so we can just sort of go through those as they come in. One question that came in was, how do you determine the quality of a practicum site or supervision when it's outside of the US or if it's a new site?
I can answer that. So first of all, we try to adhere to KCREP standards, right? Because we're KCREP accredited. However, I also understand that, you know, all the many of the countries will operate differently than we do, and I will try to make sure that there's some flexibility. At the same time, we're still meeting KCREP standards. So, for example, many of the sites in internationally will not have supervisors on site. And then I will allow for someone that the organization is familiar with outside of the organization that can provide for supervision. If there's someone who's associated with the site, maybe they're on the board of directors, or sometimes they can serve as a consultant, and whether or not they can do supervision. I will have, and this is a question that I will have to answer depending on a case by case, because every country is different. And doing supervision, doing internship outside of the US, it's not just whether you can find supervisor, but whether or not they will allow you to do that, whether the government will allow you to do that.
Thank you. Let's see what else is coming into the Q&A box. Can we do practicum and internship in a longer period of time so that we can do less hours each quarter?
You can definitely do that if you find a site that's willing to work with you. One thing to keep in mind, though, well, two things to keep in mind. One is that practicum, you have to be enrolled in a practicum class to be gaining hours and requirements. And so practicum classes cost. And so there could be, you know, you would want to weigh the cost of the practicum class, depending on how many quarters you need with, you know, you'd have to do a risk analysis there for yourself. Not risk analysis, but you know what I mean. And then also, if you, I'm losing my train of thought because I've been trying to answer all these questions in the chat box while typing. Dr. Ju, what am I missing? I feel a piece
Sorry,
of that.
I was typing an answer.
I was thinking about financial aid, about that. That was the piece.
Yeah, because you have to be enrolled, because in order, and actually Dr. Shapiris just sent that email, Jenny. So do you remember on that email? I'll let you answer.
Oh, yes. If I remember correctly. So if you're just taking, well, here's what happens, right? So financial aid requires that you are enrolled in 6 credit units per quarter in order to qualify for financial aid. However, that's for fall, winter, and spring. But in summer, if you're just taking a practicum course, which is 3 credit units, then it's okay. It doesn't, I mean, you can still qualify for financial aid. So you would need to work with your advisor to see which quarter you can have some flexibility as to the number of courses you take and which quarters you need to take, 2 in order to qualify for financial aid. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Let's see. Practicum orientation session, is that?
Oh, I'm answering that one. So we have them two times a year, one in winter and one in spring. And then we also have practicum preparation meeting end of summer. So practicum orientations, one in winter and one in spring so far. So that could change, right, Dr. Watson? But for now, that's what we're doing.
And just to clarify, that is for current students, right?
That's for current students. And sometimes students cannot make either of those meetings, and we do record them. So as long as they watch the recording, they can still become familiar with all the standards, requirements, in the process.
One question that came up, and Dr. Wathan, you answered it already in the Q&A box, but it's come up a lot with people lately who are applying to the program about how COVID-19 has impacted practicum and internship experiences. Are students still on track for getting their hours, or are they having to take longer? So could you talk a little bit more about that, and student panelists to jump in if you have any experiences about how your time has changed a little with COVID-19?
Sure. I'll give an overview that I put in the chat box, and then Dr. Ju can add, but really I think that hearing from the students would be most valuable for that question. Dr. Ju, Dr. Shapiris, and I really worked extremely hard, and at the beginning of it, we were not very hopeful that, that students were going to be able to meet, their hours, and that we were just very concerned and scared. For a few weeks there, sites were transitioning, and it was, Dr. Ju and Dr. Shapiris and I were emailing and texting and meeting day and trying to figure out, what the board wanted, what, sites were doing, and to also trying to be there for our students. And so I hope that the students feel supported at those points. We held a town hall for our current practicum students. What the university did was offer free telehealth training, a $500 training for free for all students. Also, I feel like we coordinated really well with our sites in the situations that were occurring, got the proper paperwork so that the students will not have any issues when it comes to the board and getting their license after all of this is over. So we have everything in place per the board, and we wanted to make sure we did that. And then also it seemed like sites kind of hit their stride once people got more used to telehealth. Not everyone. I mean, there was definitely students that have struggled more. But many students did get their hours, in the midst of all of this. And then the students that didn't get their hours, we're continuing to work with them, and also the university provided them with free tuition for their practicum for this summer, so that they're taking the practicum class, continuing to get hours, and not having to pay for that extra class. Jenny, do you have anything you want to add? You're muted, Jenny.
All right. So recently, we're also hoping to have a checklist. I think that, in California, for in different counties, in order for a business to be open, there's a checklist proposed, whether you meet, these guidelines, safety guidelines or not, in order for a business to qualify to open. And we're thinking that, we can also have this checklist to see whether or not a site can meet those before saying that, we feel, each student will still have to make their own decision, right? Whether or not the risk level is high enough or low enough for them to feel comfortable to be there. But we cannot force anyone to be at a site if they don't feel comfortable to. But if you're feeling uncomfortable to be at a site, then reach out to one of us, reach out to your practicum instructor, and we can discuss this with your site.
That's kind of like our next, we, are still working with our students that need to finish their hours from COVID. Initially, now we're transitioning to students starting their practicum, and we hold a forum for them as well. And just this week, for students that were supposed to start an online or a in-person training, we were working on navigating that, and students that didn't feel comfortable, making sure there were accommodations for them as far as attending the training. So that's our next part, and many sites are still taking students. I haven't heard of very many sites. I don't know, Dr. G may have a different experience, but I keep getting emails like, we're still taking interns, we're still taking practicum students, and we do have a lot of school-based sites, so though they're still taking students, they're not sure exactly whether it's going to be telehealth or in person. Nobody knows, but it seems like business as usual with a lot of caveats of we don't know what's going to happen, but we still want our interns. And honestly, there's going to be there's going to be a need for mental health services for sure. And then I'd love to hear from some of the students, unless Dr. G, there's something else.
No, I think it's good to hear from students and not just thank you.
So I would say this has definitely been like somewhat of an overwhelming experience, because I started off seeing clients, face to face in the office every day. So moving over to telehealth was challenging for me, just because I was like, I want to be in the room with people, I want to read their energy. So that was pretty tough. And then working with my organization to make sure that I'm qualified to do, telemental health, what that looks like, what are the rules and regulations around that, that are a little bit different from when you're in person as well. So I would say usually the organizations within a week or two, mine was able to pretty much get us up and running, and we did all of our sessions via telemental health. So that was great, but I know different sites have, different obstacles that they have to work through in order to get that done. But you can definitely see at least half your clients, if not more, if not all of them, just based on your site. But just be in communication and say, hey, I'm in internship, I need to finish these hours. Can I potentially see, my full caseload? So just be very transparent with them and ask them questions. And usually they're pretty good about working with you as well.
Yeah, so I would add to that and say, from my experience, I had got into a groove, and then the pandemic hit, COVID-19, and then there was a shift, and there was this feeling of uncertainty, because at the time we didn't really feel equipped to do telehealth. But I would say within that week, I think the city of Fremont did a good job of preparing us for that and giving us the necessary resources that we needed to be able to perform telehealth. Our supervisors played a good role in that. we're able to reach out to them for support. You know, they just encourage us to take it easy and just remember to be with the client. And yeah, I think it was a really good experience. I know some of my interns or, you know, classmates, they didn't have the necessary equipment like laptops, different things like that. So I think they work with them to like get set up with laptops and make the transition a little smoother. But I want to say, like, during that time, I think I speak for like the nation. It was a very difficult time for everybody. So there's a lot of adjustments that we needed to make and that our sites needed to make.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to speak about COVID-19 and finding their sites during this time?
I wanted to just quickly add that that although that the transition can be very smoothly, I know that was my experience going from in-person to telehealth. Excuse me. I think it's important to also consider your self-care, because I know from my experience, I'm talking to my clients at home, and that's really hard for me to separate that from my, you know, personal needs, and you can easily experience burnout. And I think it's really important to just find ways to practice some sort of self-care that will help you get through, you know, times like this, or just any other situations that can occur.
I wanted to add that as I was searching for my site, I knew that I wanted to go to the county, and we were pushed into a situation where we ended up doing a telephone interview. And that was actually remarkably challenging. Like Drika said, you know, wanting to be in that room and read the energy and see the people, it was really hard for me. That was a really tough interview, and I've gone through, you know, you can see my gray hair. I've been through, you know, many interviews in my life, and that was probably the hardest one because I couldn't see the people. So just something to throw out there as an experience.
Thank you. And we also got a question much earlier that I wanted to address. Private practice. A lot of people who apply write in their letters that they plan to go into private practice someday. The question also came up in the Q&A earlier. Can students do their practicum and internships in private practice?
Yeah, so in California, not at all. The Board of Behavioral Health does not allow that. In other states, some states do allow, some states don't, so you'll need to look at the regulation for each state board. One of the reasons that we don't allow that, and BBS does not allow that, is because, you know, you don't get the scope of the range of learning experience in a private practice. They're usually quite limited in the number, in the type of population they serve, and also in the presenting problems that they have to address. And also there are not a lot of what do you call, supplementary services that you can learn about. And so what your experience is going to be quite limited. That's the primary reason we don't allow that. However, there are some group practices that are nonprofit, and they have more extensive types of services and they serve a wider range of population, and sometimes we can allow that. It will have to be on case basis, and I will need to review what the organization does and what type of learning experience the student's going to get. What did I leave out, Dr. Watson?
I don't think you left anything out. It's not an option for California students, and that's not per PAU.
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't encourage it because it's so much experience in an agency setting. However, the board doesn't allow it, so you can't do it.
Yeah, in some states where there's group practice, we have, and if it's allowed by that state, I have allowed it, but just a handful it has to do. with, whether or not the student will be able to receive good training experience there.
Dr. Wathen, we do have like about 7 minutes left, but I saw that you wanted to answer a question live about, in terms of coursework and practicum, how different are the MFT route versus the LPCC route?
Excellent. Well, that's a great question. We have just changed our program of study. Before, there was not very much difference, and we really wanted to work on differentiating those two tracks. So the students that are here today, will have had, whether they've chosen to go clinical mental health or marriage, family, couple counseling as their emphasis, they've had the same courses. However, in the fall, we've changed the program of study. So the students that choose the clinical mental health course, which leads to in California, the LPCC license, and in other states, depending on where you are, whatever the terminology is for your state. In Montana, my license is a LCPC. The coursework, there's the same basic courses. However, there are more openings, more of a focus on clinical mental health without taking classes like advanced family or I think there's maybe one other family systems classes, but you'll still have kind of the same classes that the students currently have now. Then we're going to add more electives for that particular emphasis that are around, like counseling immigrants or whatever electives are offered. And that is, to provide more in-depth. So we're hoping to have more courses around topics that are important in agency work. And we're also redoing the clinical mental health and CBT class. Jenny, I can't remember the name of that class. Community mental health. That class is going to be completely redone. So you're going to get a lot more focus on the health perspective. Doesn't mean that you can't be a systems thinker, but that's what the focus will be more towards. And that degree is really going to be that emphasis for students that are, well, actually, it doesn't matter. I'll let Jenny speak to that. But for the MFCC, the marriage, family, couple counseling degree, because California requires so many different classes for to get that licensure here, the MFT licensure, it's still a pretty structured degree plan. So there are classes that are being redone, like advanced family and different things like that. However, there's not as much wiggle room as far as electives. So, and you could technically, you could choose the clinical mental health emphasis and then take some of the family classes as an elective if you wanted to, or the play therapy classes that Dr. Chen's going to be offering. So there's a lot of different things you can do with the clinical mental health emphasis choice. But the degree for the emphasis for the MFT licensure in California is going to be still pretty structured and based on systems thinking, your family experience, and meeting all the requirements for the MFT licensure in California. Jenny, what would you like to add to that?
No, I think you did great in explaining that. Yeah, so I think it has to do with, when you're going to decide whether or not you want to pursue one or the other, is think, after graduation, where do you anticipate you're going to be? If you're going to be in California, then go ahead with the MFCC emphasis. And if you're already out of state, then go with LPCC, right? Yeah, go with the clinical mental health emphasis.
Thank you both. Oh, sorry, Dr. Wathen, were you going to add anything?
No, one thing that I thought was important for prospective students to know is that with the change in the program of study, so for those of you who may have applied longer ago and haven't looked at the change in the degree plans, that there are 2 different residencies now instead of 1 residency. Of course, we don't know what that's going to look like this year with COVID, but there is a residency for your counseling skills class, also a residency where you'll be coming in for your crisis and child and adolescent class. That's more of a weekend kind of look or something. I can't remember exactly, but be sure and check out that program of study change if you haven't seen that already, because that could, that's important to know before you start.
Thank you. So we only have about a minute left, and I want to make sure I'm mindful of all of your times since you volunteered to be here this morning. But just before we sign off, do you have any kind of final words for the prospective students about practicum or just general advice on being a student in the program before we all sign off?
It is a stressful time, but at the same time, I think 95% of our students go through practicum and are successful. They do get their hours, and they do graduate and go on to do great things in life. So don't allow that to create so much anxiety for you that it paralyzes you.
Right, I agree. Just one step at a time, one moment at a time, and you don't have to have it all figured out your first quarter. There's time for you to learn and listen to other students, and so it is the most stressful thing that students report is the most stressful thing, and it doesn't have to be. You have lots of supports, and I don't know, students are probably the best to speak to this too, because it's been a long time since my practicum and internship.
And you're going through this as a cohort. You're not the only one going through. So your cohort members often are your biggest cheerleaders and supporters to get through this. Thank you, Jesse, for the link.
I was going to say real quick to touch on that. Yeah, the cohort aspect of it was really, really nice because within it, having a family, having a newborn, like I was able to lean on my classmates as well and form natural supports there too. So I just want to encourage you guys to really consider this opportunity. The practicum experience was amazing. I think we didn't say enough about how supportive our professors were during this process, and it was very smooth. If you are in the Bay Area, California, I highly recommend that you go to the Practicum Fair because even if you don't have that work experience, you have the opportunity to interact with the potential supervisors or people that's going to be working with you. So I highly recommend it, and I hope that you guys consider.
All right, thank you all so much for being here. This was really, really helpful for me and hopefully for our prospective students too. If there are any questions you had that we didn't get to, you can always email me. I'll drop my email address into the chat box for everybody, but please feel free to email me at any time. And if I can answer your question, I will. And if I can, I'll find the answer out and get back to you. Thanks everybody for being here, our wonderful panelists. Really appreciate your time this Saturday morning, and we will see you all next time. Thank you so much.